the Netherlands is quite an exceptional case because around the world we see countries starting to use electronic voting, and in the Netherlands we already used it since the 1960s, but since a couple of years, since 2007, we abolished the electronic voting machines. And in my view, yeah, that is really something like going back to the Stone Age, because now we're using pen and paper again, and it takes hours to count the votes. And so, yeah, it's a pity in my view that we abolish those electronic machines. Now, what happened was that an NGO challenged the trustworthiness of the machines, and people, in my view, just panicked. He was able to convince MPs that the machines were not trustworthy and not reliable, because people don't have any technological knowledge, they gave in to the demands of this NGO. So I think when in other times, because these times are rather that people distrust politics, and I think in that context the MPs and the ministry reacted rather strongly, instead of looking into the machines and seeing if we could add a paper trail or something, just improve the machines. They reacted quite strongly by just abolishing them. I don't know, I think it's very difficult. I think, in my view, I think we will go into the next step, the next phase, and that is maybe internet voting. But that will take another at least 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. But I do think going back to machines has become quite difficult in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Well, as you know, we had a complicated election in the year 2006. The difference between the first place and the second place was only 0.5% between the first place and the second place. So that caused an electoral reform that took place in Mexico between 2007 and 2008. And on that respect, we are preparing the presidential election next year. We're going to renew the presidency, but also Congress and the Senate. So considering that Mexico now is living some sort of problems, particularly in the border states, because of violence related to drug trafficking. So our main goal is to establish the electoral system in a proper manner, as we have done in the last 25 years, to call people to participate, and we hope that through democracy we can renew the powers in Mexico.
Look, fortunately in South Africa, what we do in relation to the political influence, we've got what we call the party liaison committees. We sit with all the political parties and get advice from the political parties about how we should actually deal with the issues that we're supposed to be dealing with. But also in terms of the appointments, because the majority of people here have been raising issues of how do the commissioners get appointed. In South Africa, we've gone through a rigorous and very lengthy process of appointing commissioners. Firstly, the Chief Justice, together with 4 other institutions within society that are independent, constitute a panel that interviews people who have been nominated by the general public or organizations. After shortlisting all this, they interview those candidates, and after the candidates have been interviewed, the list is then submitted to Parliament, a list of about 10 people. And Parliament then debates. And remember, in terms of a proportional representation system, you've got almost all the political parties represented in Parliament. They debate the names and eventually agree on the 4 names that have got to be submitted to the President. So once there is that agreement, then the President cannot actually reject the list. That's how powerful our process is. All the President has got to do is allocate responsibilities in terms of the chairperson and deputy chairperson, and also write letters of appointment. So this is a very elaborate process of basically dealing with the suspicion around the process of appointment of the commissioners. But an important point that was also raised, and this is a very interesting one, where people are saying, where are these people coming from? Of course, we are members of our societies before we become commissioners, and therefore we are subject to all pressures and relationships that are happening within the society. And from time to time, yes, you will find people who identify with particular political parties. In fact, all of us as commissioners vote, and because we vote, it basically means that we've got preferences for particular political parties. The question is whether we're using our preference for particular political parties to interfere with our decision-making process. If that becomes a problem, if that is the situation, then it becomes a problem. So you need people who, yes, are politically astute, they understand what's going on, yes, they've got preferences for particular parties, but at the same time, they've got to make sure that once they are in this position of being commissioners, they can be able to take decisions independently without any regard for any preference of political parties, and also that the decisions of the commission, they've got to be consistent, reliable, and beyond reproach. I think that is the most important thing that needs to happen within this context.
Well, the truth of the matter, and this is something that's very frustrating, is we know very little. Partially because the data don't exist. Quite often the data exist but aren't collected, and sometimes even if it's collected, not having all of that data across a wide range of countries really limits our ability to tell what's going on. We do have some suspicions. For example, one of the things that you see quite clearly in the United States and a number of well-developed democracies is that women vote at slightly higher rates than men do. Not enormously, but 2, 3, 4% perhaps. But in developing democracies, some of them have a tendency that you have clear sort of women voted rates 10% lower than men do. And that the differences between those two are quite significant. 13, 14% gap between developed democracies and developing are going to matter. Information. And the truth of the matter is that the right way to look at this is to do studies where we run experiments the same way the natural scientists do. Is you try different programs and you see whether they work or not. You send out public information campaigns on women running, on women voting, and you hope then that that has some impact so that women understand that this is also part of their tradition too. It would be very nice to see, for example, countries like Liberia. What is the gender composition of the voting population when you have a woman running for president? And does it change dramatically when you have a woman running for president? So some of that information is out there, but it's a real trick collecting it all.